Donald Trump saying Europe is not heading in the right direction and that some places in Europe are not recognizable anymore. He told the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, this was because of what he claimed was unchecked immigration from faraway lands. To date, the Davos meeting has been dominated by concern from America's European allies at Mr. Trump's stated intention to annex Greenland. Analysts say there's great anger and frustration and consternation within the European camp and a feeling that the strong NATO alliance is under threat from a president who does not have any respect for the fundamental treaties of the NATO agreement. They say there's never been a situation where an American president has threatened to annex the territory of another NATO ally, not to mention threatening other allies who stand with Denmark with a slurry of tariffs. They say Mr. Trump is shaking the world order more than any president since the Second World War.
This afternoon, I want to discuss how we have achieved this economic miracle, how we intend to raise living standards for our citizens to levels never seen before, and perhaps how you too and the places where you come from can do much better by following what we're doing, because certain places in Europe are not even recognizable, frankly, anymore. They're not recognizable. And we can argue about it, but there's no argument. Friends come back from different places. I don't want to insult anybody and say I don't recognize it. And that's not in a positive way. That's in a very negative way. And I love Europe, and I want to see Europe go good, but it's not heading in the right direction.
The US president wants to see the US flag in territory of Greenland. That's a shock, frankly speaking. That's unacceptable. We defend Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, the integrity, territorial integrity. And who plays with Greenland plays with NATO. And again, my question is, where are the MAGA friends? When Roberta Metsola at the beginning of the plenary this week underlined the support for Greenland and the support for Denmark, I saw that from the Patriots, half of the Patriots group stood up and defended the territorial integrity of Denmark, and half of the team kept seated and was obviously on the side of Washington. So the Patriots have to decide whether they want to be real Europeans or they are a colony of Washington. That's at stake. That's at stake in this moment of time. So what we need is a European answer.
Well, for more on all this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the author and international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Dr. Laskiewicz, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You think the Europeans would have been breathing a sigh of relief when Mr. Trump said he has no intention of invading Greenland?
Yes, I think they do. There are two problems, though. He will not win easily without an invasion, although he's now preparing up his key assault, which is to say the purchase of Greenland with a bounty for all the 57,000 Greenlanders. So if that were to fail, that would leave only the military. And in any case, one of the aspects why the, if you like, the bribe, as what you could call it, is going to work, if it works, is because of the threat of military assault unless it's taken. And having removed this threat, he's in effect shot himself in the leg. So it's quite unclear to see how he expects to win. The other aspect is it must be remembered that the president is very volatile as a character. And the fact he has publicly stated in front of his allies that he won't use force actually in the long run means nothing. It's quite possible that he may use it after all. It won't be the first time he's changed his mind by 180 degrees. Witness how he plays, if you like, or negotiates, or whatever one calls it, with Russia and Ukraine, come to that. So therefore, yes, it is a sigh of relief, but no, I don't think actually it precludes the use of force in the medium term.
Well, you raised two very important points there. One is that the weather can change in Donald Trump's world in the blink of an eye. So this may well not be the end of the story as far as invasion is concerned. The other point that you made is that Mr. Trump says he won't use force. On the other hand, he says he wants negotiations. And you make the point, why would Denmark want to negotiate then, knowing that it won't be kicked out by force? I mean, could you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, precisely. The point is that he has decided to come with the olive branch, but there's nothing he can offer much which Denmark or Greenland want to hear. Moreover, there is another aspect of these negotiations, which is actually hidden. What status Greenland will have in such a USA? It's been raised, it will be like Guam. Guam has no rights. They're not really US citizens. They're trapped between being part of the USA and not being part of the USA simultaneously, incidentally. And they're basically third-class citizens. And the point is, this is one of those aspects which presumably he will make clear. However, the point is, without this threat of force, it's very hard to see why they wouldn't negotiate. And the bribe he's offering, or if you like, the purchase, which is 880 million, I believe, in all, taking into account how much money he would offer also the individual Greenlanders. The fact of the matter is that, is this enough? Will they even be interested for that because of, for example, this Guam issue? And so therefore, it is unlikely in his present approach that he'll go ahead, and I imagine that he may well change his mind about the use of force, which will surprise nobody, incidentally. And so therefore, in that respect, all he's done is ruled it out in the short term. If he gets his way in the negotiations, he won't have to do it. But I imagine if he doesn't, therefore he'll return to the threat of force. So hence, in the medium term, the threat has not been removed.
Indeed, but there was no line that he would take the tariffs off the table, was there? So that threat remains, and that is something that will presumably continue to worry the Europeans.
Yes, the threat of tariffs will remain, and I expect them even perhaps to have to use it, because it's not much, the tariff, but it suffices to certainly damage Europe's economies were it to go ahead. And that's certainly one of the threats he can certainly carry, and he's not removed the threat, and I expect him even to state it again. And so therefore, yes, it will carry on. Please note one other point he made in his speech. This is worthwhile noting. For Europe is reacting to this as if he were Adolf Hitler. And indeed, the parallel has been drawn, especially on the social media. But there is a point to remember that the Americans have actually acquired all their territory up till by means of purchase. They bought the Louisiana Purchase. They purchased this, they purchased that. Sure, they conquered part of Mexico, today's Texas, and so on. But the fact of the matter is, in American eyes, Donald Trump is not doing anything at all out of the ordinary. It's very important to realize this, because Europe is acting one way and MAGA supporters in America see it totally differently. What about the Alaskan Purchase, for example? That was a purchase. And so therefore, this aspect means that he will not withdraw. And incidentally, Greenland has been on America's menu now for centuries.
And those are very important points that you make. I don't know what you think of this in the pecking order of sort of important things, but he appeared to confuse Greenland with Iceland several times. I mean, what do you make of that? Because, I mean, they're both in the same part of the world, and there is, of course, ice in Greenland. Was it a clear slip? Did he get the two names confused, keeping in mind that when Joe Biden would make a gaffe like that, Trump would make sure that it became headlines by pointing it out? So clearly, Trump himself is prone to those kinds of verbal stumbles as well.
Yes, he is. In fact, all Americans are, for a very simple reason. If you are in America, you really feel cut off from the rest of the world. The television, for example, gives you this view that America is the world. And when they actually go abroad, and many Americans don't, incidentally, when you go abroad, they get very easily confused as to countries. The famous one, I think, is Ronald Reagan, who started an entire speech, I believe, in Bolivia, and kept talking about the people of Brazil, or was it vice versa? Who knows? And certainly he wasn't very sure until the president pointed out that he was speaking about the wrong country. But it was a very nice speech, by the way, praising the people. And so the point is nothing new about it. It's very American. The Americans are prone to these gaffes. No one is going to take any interest of it. But you're quite right. He did point it out about Biden. It's up to the Democrats to point this out about President Trump. And in this respect, President Donald Trump, it must be pointed out, for all the things he's been criticized for, as a contender, he was much sharper than the Democrats were now. He did point out all the gaffes that Biden made. And the Democrats aren't doing that very well at all in the States, as far as I can tell, including not just this, but a whole series of gaffes you could point out.
That's an interesting observation. But of course, returning to the speech, I mean, there was a lot of muscularity in it, wasn't there? Kind of reminding Europe who's in charge. A lot of waving around of the big stick.
Yes, quite so. He's the major power. And the surprising thing in world historical terms is how little America has used it. Russia used the big stick all the time. China does. And finally, America has decided to join in. But the interesting point in historical terms, the big powers have always waved the big stick. World War I was started because Austro-Hungary felt like bullying Serbia, which didn't work out for them, of course, but there you are. But it's quite, how can I put it? It's been the world for the last 6,000 years. The big powers bully or try and conquer smaller ones. And this is now a reversion to it. And certainly Europe, almost defenseless in comparison to America. And in any case, now has no longer a bigger market, no longer big still, of course, but by no means the most important nation in the world that it was, say, 100 years ago, the most important continent, is just simply a prize. And certainly it's up to him whether he chooses to do this or not. It terrifies the Europeans. But then again, they did do this sort of thing before. Please remember, Denmark wasn't exactly pleasant to the Greenlanders. And if we're talking about annexation, well, at home, Denmark annexed Norway, admittedly 400 years ago. But, you know, these annexations have happened. And therefore, from that point of view, he's simply acting as a normal historical power, as opposed to the America we've known for decades, this sort of sleeping giant, if you like, pleasant, benign, and helpful.
And I'm glad you touched on the historical there, Dr. Laskiewicz. And what did you make of what Mr. Trump had to say about the war in Ukraine? Did it sound like there was something new on the table? Because a lot of attention seems to have been diverted away from Ukraine because of Greenland.
As far as I can tell, President Donald Trump can only keep one idea in his head at any time. And right now, it is Greenland. Previously, it was Venezuela. And as for Ukraine, he's sort of almost put it on the back burner. He has no interest in it. And in any case, he's interested in working with Vladimir Putin because he's invited him to be on the board of peace for Gaza. And so therefore, to be quite honest, I have the impression he's almost totally disinterested. The Americans are still supplying the Starlink, which is the key to Ukraine surviving militarily. But it would not surprise me if that were withdrawn, not so much because of any tactic, but because simply he's no longer interested in that. So therefore, yes, it's not of great importance to. It is, of course, of great importance to people in Europe, but America is not in Europe. It's thousands of miles away. Yeah.
It is. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, I want to thank you very much for your assessment. He is, of course, the author and international affairs analyst, and he was talking to me on the line there from London.